The harbour wind carried the scent of tar and distant lands. Young Crusoe tightened his grip on the worn satchel. His father's words still echoed in his mind. Stay home. Learn the trade. Yet the call of the sea pulled stronger than any lecture. Crusoe slipped through the shadowed alleys. Lantern light flickered against wooden hulls. He found the vessel at the end of the pier. The crew moved like shadows loading crates. One glance from the captain was all it took. A nod, a coin pressed into a calloused palm. Crusoe climbed aboard without looking back. The ship eased from the dock at dawn. Sails unfurled with a heavy snap. Salt spray kissed his face. For the first time he felt free. The world beyond the horizon waited. Days passed in steady rhythm. Waves rolled beneath the keel. Stars wheeled overhead at night. Then the sky changed. Clouds gathered low and dark. They twisted with an inner light. Not lightning alone. Something older stirred within the tempest. Winds howled names no sailor knew. The sea rose in walls of foam. Crusoe clung to the rail. Timbers groaned and split. Magical currents tugged at the hull like unseen hands. The mast cracked with a sound like breaking bone. Water poured across the deck. Men shouted spells and prayers in the same breath. The ship tilted. Then it sank beneath him. Cold closed over Crusoe's head. He kicked upward through swirling lights. Enchanted debris drifted past. When he broke the surface, the storm had already claimed everything. Only driftwood and silence remained. He floated alone under a clearing sky. The sea calmed as if the magic had spent itself. Land appeared as a faint line. Crusoe swam toward it with the last of his strength. Sand met his hands at last. Sand, he dragged himself beyond the tide. The island waited in quiet green. No voices called. No ship approached. Only the soft rush of waves answered him now. Crusoe lay on the sand with his eyes closed. The grains pressed against his cheek like tiny grains of warmth. He felt the last of the water slip from his clothes. His fingers curled into the beach without thinking. The island breathed around him. Light rose from the ground in faint threads. They moved like slow veins under the surface. He opened his eyes and watched them pulse once, then fade. He pushed himself up on his elbows. The green of the trees stood thick and still, yet the light returned between the roots. It glowed soft and blue, then shifted to gold. Crusoe stared until his breath steadied. A single spark lifted from the sand near his hand. It hovered for a moment, then drifted inland. Another followed it. They left trails that dissolved in the air. He rose to his knees and brushed the grains from his arms. The shore stretched in both directions. Shells lay scattered in patterns that almost formed lines. When he touched one, the shell warmed under his palm. Inside it, a tiny light flickered once and went out. He set it down again. Crusoe walked a few steps toward the tree line. The sand whispered under his feet. Not with wind, but with a low sound like many voices far away. He paused and listened. The sound stopped when he stopped. Between the trunks, small shapes moved. They were not animals. They shone like captured moonlight in the shape of hands or wings. One drifted closer, then retreated. It left a scent of salt and flowers. He stepped into the shade. The light under the leaves grew stronger. Vines glowed along their length. They pulsed in time with his own heartbeat. Crusoe placed his hand on one vine. Warmth traveled up his arm and faded. A spirit formed ahead of him. It rose from a pool of water between roots. The form was tall and thin, with edges that shifted like mist. Eyes like white fire regarded him without threat. It spoke in a voice that sounded like waves on stone. The words came slow and clear. They told of an island that remembered every foot that touched it. They spoke of light that fed on memory and fear alike. Crusoe answered with his name. The spirit repeated it once, then sank back into the pool. He continued deeper. The forest opened into a clearing ringed by glowing stones. Each stone hummed when he passed. The air felt thicker here, as if filled with unseen watchers. Leaves rustled, though no wind moved them. Crusoe sat on a fallen trunk. The wood was smooth and warm. Tiny lights moved beneath the bark like fish in clear water. He rested his head in his hands. Exhaustion pulled at his limbs, yet the island would not let him sleep. A new spirit appeared at the edge of the clearing. It took the shape of a child made of sand and light. The figure circled him once, then stopped. Its eyes held the same quiet green as the trees. It pointed toward a path that had not been there before. Crusoe stood and followed. The path glowed faintly under his steps. Spirits lined the way like silent lanterns. Some reached out and brushed his shoulder with cool fingers. Each touch left a small mark of light that faded slowly. The path led to a cliff overlooking the sea. Below, the water shone with the same living light. Shapes moved far beneath the surface. They rose and sank in patterns that matched the breathing of the island itself. Crusoe watched until the light began to dim. He turned back toward the trees. The spirits had vanished. Only the steady glow of the vines remained. He walked until the clearing came into view again. There he lay down on the soft earth. The island continued its quiet rhythm around him. Light pulsed beneath the ground. Hidden voices whispered names he did not know. Crusoe closed his eyes and let the warmth of the sand hold him. The night deepened without stars. Crusoe stirred on the soft earth. The warmth lingered against his back. He opened his eyes to the dark canopy above. No stars pierced the black. Only a faint silver glow filtered through the leaves. He rose slowly. The island breathed around him. Light still pulsed in faint lines beneath the soil. He stepped forward. His feet found a path without effort. The air carried a sweet scent. It drew him toward a cluster of low branches. Strange fruits hung there. They glowed with inner light. One fruit pulsed brighter than the rest. Crusoe reached out. The skin felt warm under his fingers. He plucked it free. Juice ran down his palm. He lifted it to his mouth. The first bite filled his tongue with honey and earth. Visions bloomed behind his eyes. He saw waves crashing on distant shores. He saw faces he had known long ago. They smiled, then faded into mist. Another bite brought new sights. Mountains rose from the sea. Roots twisted into glowing patterns. Voices whispered again. They spoke of power hidden in the soil. Crusoe finished the fruit. The visions faded. Strength returned to his limbs. He turned back toward the clearing. Fallen branches lay nearby. He gathered them one by one. He leaned them against a thick trunk. Leaves wove between the gaps. The shelter took shape under his hands. The moon rose higher. Its light touched the edges of the clearing. Eyes watched from the shadows. They shone like small silver coins. Crusoe felt their gaze. He did not turn. He kept working. The walls grew thicker. A low roof formed overhead. He stepped inside the new shelter. The air felt cooler there. He sat on the ground once more. Another fruit rested in his pocket. Its glow warmed his leg. He took it out. The skin pulsed in rhythm with his breath. He ate slowly. New visions came. He saw roots reaching toward the stars. He saw light traveling through the ground like blood. The eyes remained in the trees. They blinked once. Crusoe met their stare without fear. The island had given him gifts. Shelter stood ready. Visions lingered in his mind. He closed his eyes again. The night held its quiet watch. Crusoe stirred as light crept across the sand. The visions from the night pulled at his thoughts. He rose and gathered his strength. The caves called from deep within the island. He walked inland without haste. Trees parted around him like silent watchers. The ground hummed beneath his feet. A faint glow waited ahead. A faint glow waited ahead. Crusoe stepped inside. Walls shimmered with soft blue light. Water dripped in steady rhythm. Each drop echoed far ahead. He followed the light deeper. Caverns opened wide and tall. Crystals pulsed along the ceiling. They breathed like living hearts. Crusoe touched one gently. Warmth spread through his fingers. Shadows moved across the stone. They formed shapes that vanished quickly. The air grew thicker. He paused to listen. Footsteps answered from somewhere beyond. A figure waited at the next bend. It stood tall and still. Moss covered its ancient limbs. Eyes glowed like the crystals. Crusoe met the gaze without turning away. The guardian spoke in a voice like grinding stone. Words formed slowly in the air. The island remembers every step you take. Crusoe nodded once. He waited for more. The guardian raised one hand. Light rippled outward from its palm. Echoes of old storms filled the cavern. Trust only what the ground reveals. Crusoe felt the warning settle in his chest. More images flashed across the walls. Ships burned on distant shores. Faces he once knew drifted and faded. The guardian lowered its hand. Silence returned like a held breath. Crusoe turned back toward the entrance. The crystals dimmed behind him. Each step felt heavier than the last. The guardian's words lingered in his mind. They mixed with the island's quiet gifts. Outside the cave, the sun hung low. Trees whispered overhead once more. Crusoe walked on. The warnings traveled with him. The island watched and waited. Crusoe entered the edge of the forest. Shadows stretched long across the ground. The air felt thick with unseen movement. Leaves rustled without wind. He paused to listen. The trees leaned closer together. Their trunks bent at odd angles. Bark shifted like skin under light. A low murmur rose from the canopy. Words formed in the sound. They spoke of roots and rain. Crusoe took one careful step. He kept his hands at his sides. A branch lowered toward him. It stopped at eye level. The wood glowed faintly green. Crusoe reached out slowly. He touched the bark with one finger. Warmth spread through his skin. The tree sighed. Its voice filled the quiet. Take only what is offered. Give thanks in return. He nodded once. The branch lifted away. Another tree creaked nearby. Its roots pulled free from the soil. The ground trembled under his feet. Crusoe steadied himself against a trunk. The forest rearranged itself around him. Paths opened and closed without warning. He followed the newest path. Sunlight filtered through moving leaves. A fallen limb lay ahead. It was smooth and pale. No rot touched its surface. Crusoe knelt beside it. He asked permission in a whisper. The limb rolled toward his hand. He lifted it with care. The wood felt alive in his grip. Veins of light ran beneath the bark. Crusoe carried it to a flat stone. He searched for a sharp rock. One appeared at his feet. The island provided what he needed. He scraped away the outer layer. Shavings curled like thin ribbons. Hours passed in steady work. The limb became a staff. Its end tapered to a point. Crusoe tested its balance. The staff hummed softly. He planted it in the earth. The ground accepted it without resistance. Nearby trees swayed in approval. A larger oak groaned in the distance. Its limbs parted to reveal a hollow. Crusoe approached with respect. Inside the hollow rested strips of flexible wood. He gathered a few. They bent easily in his hands. He wove them into a frame. The frame held the shape of a shield. The forest spoke again. Its words came as rustling patterns. Defense requires balance. Take no more than strength allows. Crusoe answered with silence. He understood the warning. He added the shield to his staff. Both items rested against a boulder. Evening light turned the leaves gold. Crusoe sat on the ground. He ate dried fruit from his pack. The trees continued their quiet conversation. They told stories of storms survived. They shared secrets of hidden springs. He listened without interrupting. A new branch lowered near his shoulder. It offered a small bundle of twigs. Crusoe accepted them. He bound them with vine. The bundle became a simple torch. Resin from the wood caught light easily. He lit it with a spark from flint. The flame burned steady and green. The forest grew darker. Shapes moved between trunks. Crusoe held the staff ready. The shield rested on his arm. No threat approached. The trees stood guard. Their roots formed barriers where needed. He felt the island's protection settle around him. Night deepened. Stars appeared through shifting gaps. Crusoe leaned against the staff. Sleep came in slow waves. Dreams mixed with the forest's murmurs. He saw tools yet to be made. He saw defenses yet to be tested. The living wood continued its work beside him. Morning returned with soft light. Crusoe rose and gathered his creations. The staff felt heavier now. Strength had settled into the grain. He walked deeper into the trees. The forest parted to let him pass. Each step carried new purpose. The island watched and waited no longer. It walked with him. Crusoe stepped onward through the green gloom. The island moved beside him like a silent companion. Leaves brushed his shoulders without sound. Roots lifted and settled again behind his heels. He paused at the edge of a small clearing. The ground here felt different under his boots. Footprints marked the soil in long, dark lines. They curved like the edges of forgotten shadows. No bird called. No breeze stirred the air. Crusoe knelt and studied the nearest track. It sank deep into the earth, yet left no loose dirt behind. The edges shimmered faintly as though the print itself refused to fade. He touched the rim with one finger. Cold spread up his arm like water from a winter stream. The staff in his hand grew warm in answer. Light pulsed once along its grain. Crusoe rose and followed the line of prints. They led deeper between the trunks. Each mark overlapped the next in perfect rhythm. Consisting a low drum beat reached his ears after many steps. The sound came from ahead where the trees thinned. Crusoe moved slower now. He placed each foot with care. The island pressed closer as if to shield his passing. Through the final screen of vines he saw them. Men and women stood in a half circle around a pit of glowing coals. Their bodies were painted with ash and leaf juice. They wore necklaces of bone and shell. In the center of their circle lay a great stone shaped like a folded wing. Crusoe watched from the shadows. One of the figures stepped forward and spoke in a tongue that rolled like distant thunder. The others answered in a single voice. Their words rose and fell in worship. They spoke of a dragon that slept beneath the island's heart. They spoke of its breath that would one day wake the land and devour the sea. The footprints Crusoe had followed led straight into their circle. The tracks belonged to these worshippers, yet something else walked among them. A darker shape moved at the edge of the firelight. Its outline flickered like smoke given form. Crusoe gripped the staff tighter. Strength from the morning's work still lived inside the wood. He felt the island's attention turn toward the stone wing. The ground beneath the clearing trembled once. The cannibals began a slow dance around the coals. Their feet matched the rhythm of the hidden drum. Each step left a new shadow print that glowed for a moment before sinking away. Crusoe understood then. The tracks were not made by flesh alone. They were offerings to the dragon that slumbered below. He counted 7 figures in all. Their eyes shone with a hunger that was not for food. They raised their arms and called the dragon's name in the old tongue. The name tasted of smoke and salt when it reached Crusoe's ears. The dark shape at the fire's edge grew clearer. It wore the form of a tall man whose skin was made of shifting scales. Its mouth opened in a silent roar. The worshippers bowed lower. Crusoe stepped back one careful pace. A vine curled around his ankle and tugged him farther into cover. The island did not wish him seen. He let the shadows close again. The ceremony continued without pause. The cannibals offered bowls of dark liquid to the stone wing. The liquid vanished into cracks that had not been there before. The ground drank it with a low sigh. Crusoe felt the staff grow heavier once more. Its power pressed against his palm like a question. He answered with silence. This was not yet the moment to act. The fire dimmed as the worshippers finished their dance. They left the clearing one by one. Their footprints remained behind like black scars. The scaled shadow lingered longest. It turned its head toward Crusoe's hiding place. Empty eyes regarded the trees. Then it too faded into the earth. Crusoe waited until the last sound had gone. Only then did he leave the cover of the vines. He walked around the cooling coals and studied the stone wing. Its surface felt warm though the fire had died. Deep beneath his feet, something vast stirred in its sleep. He planted the staff in the soil beside the stone. A single leaf unfurled from the wood and drifted down onto the wing. The island answered with a slow heartbeat that rose through Crusoe's legs. He turned away at last. The footprints of shadow lay behind him now. Ahead, the forest opened once more. Crusoe walked on, carrying the island's weight and its warning. The dragon dreamed still, yet its servants had marked the path. Crusoe walked on through the thickening trees. The forest breathed around him in slow swells. Each step carried the island's warning deeper into his bones. Shadows stretched long between the trunks. He paused at a ridge of moss. A faint drumbeat reached his ears from below. Not the island's heartbeat this time. Something sharper, something cruel. Crusoe descended with care. Vines parted before his hands like living curtains. He crouched behind a screen of ferns. Below lay a clearing ringed by torches that burned with blue flame. Figures in scaled cloaks circled a stone altar. Upon the altar knelt a young man bound in ropes of shadow. His eyes were fierce despite the fear. The cloaked servants chanted low words that made the air shiver. One raised a curved blade etched with dragon runes. Crusoe felt the island stir beneath his feet, a pulse of shared warning. He gripped the staff he had carved from driftwood and stepped forward. The servants turned as one. The first attacker lunged. Crusoe swung the staff low. Wood met scaled armor with a dull crack. Magic flared along the grain of the staff. Light burst outward. Two more servants fell back, hissing. The captive twisted against his bonds. Crusoe reached the altar in 3 strides. He struck the chains with the staff's glowing tip. Shadow ropes dissolved into smoke. The young man rose free. Together they fought the remaining circle. The captive moved with quick grace. He seized a fallen torch and swung it in wide arcs. Blue fire scattered the cloaked figures. One by one they fled into the trees. Silence settled over the clearing. Crusoe studied the stranger. The man's skin bore faint glowing marks that matched the island's hidden veins. A bond already hummed between them. The young man spoke first in a tongue touched by the sea. Crusoe answered with the island's own words. Understanding passed without translation. They had both felt the dragon's distant dream. Both carried its mark now. They left the clearing side by side. The rescued man took the name Friday when Crusoe offered it. Together they walked the path the island opened. Magic wove between their steps like shared breath. Ahead the forest thinned toward the shore. Crusoe felt lighter with an ally at his side. The dragon's servants would return, yet the island had given them this first victory. Friday touched the staff and nodded. The bond held steady. They moved on through the quiet trees. The trees parted gently before them. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in soft beams. Crusoe matched Friday's steady stride. The path curved toward a hidden glade. Water whispered ahead. They reached the clearing without haste. A pool lay still at its center. Crystal clear water caught the light like polished stone. Friday halted at the edge. Crusoe stopped beside him. The air felt charged. Friday knelt. He dipped one hand into the surface. Ripples spread outward in slow circles. "Watch the water." His voice carried low. Crusoe leaned forward. The pool shimmered. Images flickered beneath. A shadow of wings crossed the reflection. Friday withdrew his hand. The vision faded. He gestured for Crusoe to try. Crusoe copied the motion. Cool liquid met his fingers. Power stirred beneath the touch. It rose like mist from the depths. The spring responded to intent. Friday spoke again. "Draw it inward. Let the island speak through the flow." Crusoe closed his eyes. He felt the magic thread upward along his arm. It settled in his chest. Warmth spread outward. A new image formed. Distant shapes moved across the water. Scaled forms gathered near the cliffs. They carried jagged weapons. Crusoe pulled his hand back. The vision dissolved. He drew a steady breath. Friday nodded once. The spring shows what approaches. Not all paths are fixed. Yet knowledge grants time. Crusoe studied the pool again. Its surface remained calm. He tried once more. This time he reached deeper. Magic answered with greater force. The water glowed faintly. Another scene emerged. A storm gathered over the sea. Lightning revealed a ship in peril. Crusoe held the image longer. Details sharpened. He sensed the danger's timing. Friday placed a hand on his shoulder. "Enough for now. The power must be paced. Too much at once clouds the mind." Crusoe released the connection. The glow faded. Strength lingered in his limbs. They sat at the pool's rim. Friday explained the spring's nature. It fed from the island's heart. Every current carried echoes of what might come. Crusoe listened. He asked how to shape the visions. Friday demonstrated again. A single drop on the staff summoned a brief warning of hidden routes ahead. Practice followed in measured steps. Crusoe drew small threads of power. He learned to release them without strain. The spring rewarded patience. Future dangers appeared as faint outlines first. Then they gained clarity. Time passed unmarked in the glade. Light shifted across the water. Crusoe felt the bond between them strengthen. Friday's guidance became part of the flow. Together they traced a vision of approaching scouts. The dragon's servants moved with purpose, yet the island offered paths around them. Time paused. Crusoe stood at last. The lesson settled into his bones. The crystal spring would remain their quiet ally. Friday rose beside him. They turned back toward the trees. The bond held steady once more. Crusoe stepped forward into the shadowed path. The trees closed around them like old friends. Friday matched his stride without a word. The scouts passed on the ridge above. Their scaled forms moved in tight formation. Yet the island bent its trails away from them. Crusoe felt the ground shift beneath his boots. A faint tremor warned of deeper trouble ahead. They reached the clearing where the dragon waited. The beast lay coiled around the central peak. Its wings stretched wide enough to shadow half the island. Its eyes opened slowly. Smoke curled from its nostrils. They reached. Friday drew his spear. Crusoe raised the crystal shard from the spring. Light pulsed along its edge. The dragon lifted its head. Scales scraped against stone with a sound like grinding metal. The first blast of flame came low. Crusoe dove behind a boulder. Friday rolled to the side and hurled his spear. It struck the dragon's flank but glanced off. The beast roared and the island shuddered. Waves crashed higher against the distant shores. A faint tremor. Crusoe called on the spring's memory. The crystal flared in his hand. Water rose from the ground in thin streams. They wrapped around the dragon's legs like living vines. The creature thrashed and broke two of them. Friday charged again. He leapt onto a low ledge and struck at the wing joint. The spear bit deeper this time. The dragon twisted and sent Friday tumbling. Crusoe ran to catch him. Their hands met, and the bond flared once more. Together they circled the beast. The dragon's tail swept the clearing. Trees splintered and fell. Crusoe whispered to the crystal. More water rose and formed a barrier. The flames hissed against it. More water found his footing. He climbed the creature's back using the spear as a hook. Crusoe directed the water streams upward. They pushed Friday higher. The dragon bucked and tried to shake him loose. More fleeting provided a sludge can equals efforted a let's to succeed. Crusoe planted his feet and poured the last of the crystal's light into the air. A wave of force struck the dragon's chest. The beast reared back. Friday drove the spear home between two scales. The dragon screamed. Its wings folded. The tremors slowed. Crusoe lowered the crystal. Friday slid down from the still form. The island settled into a new quiet. They stood side by side as the sun broke through the smoke. The sun broke through the smoke. Crusoe and Friday stood side by side. The dragon lay still behind them. Its scales caught the first light like broken mirrors. Crusoe lowered the crystal further. Its glow faded to a soft ember. Friday wiped blood from his spear tip. Neither spoke at first. The air smelled of salt and scorched earth. Waves lapped the distant shore in steady rhythm. A faint shimmer rose from the ground. It spread outward in rings of pale light. The island itself seemed to breathe again. Trees swayed without wind. Vines uncurled from the dragon's body. Flowers opened in clusters of blue and gold. Crusoe turned slowly. He watched the light gather. Forms took shape within it. Tall figures emerged one by one. They wore robes woven from mist and root. Their faces held no age, yet carried ancient weight. 7 spirits formed a loose circle around the pair. The lead spirit stepped forward. Its voice carried like distant surf. "You have ended the beast that fed on our heart." The words hung in the air. Crusoe felt them settle in his chest. Friday gripped his spear tighter but did not raise it. Another spirit spoke from the left. Its tone was lower and more measured. "The island owes you balance now. We offer what was once denied to all who washed ashore." Crusoe listened without reply. He studied each face in turn. None showed threat or haste. The circle tightened by one pace. Visions bloomed in the air between them. First came a throne of coral and stone. It stood on the highest cliff. Armies of spirits and beasts bowed beneath it. Crusoe saw himself crowned in light. The island stretched in endless green. Storms bent around its shores at his word. Seasons turned by his hand alone. The image shifted. A second path opened beside it. A simple raft waited at the tide line. Friday stood at the helm with sail unfurled. Open water rolled beyond the reef. Stars guided the way north. Distant lands rose on the horizon. Crusoe recognized the curve of familiar coasts. The lead spirit raised one hand. "Choose. Rule here in endless peace, or walk the waves once more. Both paths are open only this once." Crusoe stepped closer to the visions. He reached out but touched only air. The throne image held warmth and weight. The sea path felt cool and uncertain. Friday spoke at last. His voice stayed quiet. "Master, the island is alive now. It would follow you, yet the sea calls louder than before." Crusoe nodded once. He looked from one vision to the other. Memories of shipwreck and hunger rose briefly. They mixed with new images of power and stillness. The spirits waited without motion. Their light pulsed in time with the crystal still held in Crusoe's palm. He closed his fingers around it. The glow answered with steady warmth. No further words came from the circle. Only the island sounds filled the space between breaths. Crusoe turned to Friday again. The choice rested on more than one man. Together they had survived the dragon. Together they would decide what followed. The sun climbed higher. Shadows shortened across the clearing. The visions held their place without fading. One spirit added a final line. "The sea forgets nothing. The throne remembers all." Crusoe drew a slow breath. He let it out in measured time. The weight of both offers settled evenly on his shoulders. Friday shifted his stance. He waited for the next word. Crusoe looked once more at the raft in the vision, then at the throne of coral. Neither image moved. The spirits remained patient. The island held its quiet around them. Crusoe let the visions linger in his mind a moment longer. He felt the pull of the raft and the weight of the coral throne at once. Neither path revealed its end. Friday remained still beside him. The island air stayed cool and unmoving. A low sound rose from the water beyond the cove. It began as a faint creak of timber and grew into the slow slap of waves against a hull. Crusoe turned his head toward the sound. Friday did the same. They watched the mist part in a thin line across the horizon. The vessel that appeared was no ordinary ship. Its sails glowed with a pale light that did not come from sun or moon. The wood of its sides looked carved from shadow and bone. Figures moved on its deck, men in tattered coats who spoke in low voices that carried over the water. Crusoe counted 12 of them. Their eyes searched the shore with the hunger of men long denied land. He knew their faces even at this distance. Some had served under him years before. Others had been part of the mutiny that left him here. Now they returned under a different flag. The ship drifted closer without the aid of wind. Its anchor chain rattled as it dropped. The splash echoed across the cove and faded into silence. Crusoe stepped forward until his feet touched the wet sand. The spirits that had offered him the raft and the throne remained quiet. They offered no further sign. Friday placed a hand on his shoulder and waited. The mutineers lowered a boat. Oars dipped into the water with measured strokes. The first man to step ashore wore a coat once blue but now streaked with salt and age. He carried a cutlass at his belt, yet kept his hands open. His name had been Thomas Reed. Crusoe remembered the day Reed had sworn loyalty and the day he had broken it. Reed stopped 10 paces away and inclined his head. "We come not to fight," Reed said. "The island answers to you now. We seek passage through its waters or shelter beneath its trees. The choice is yours to grant or refuse." Crusoe studied the boat behind Reed. More men waited there, their faces half hidden by the rising mist. Some clutched ropes and hooks. Others kept their eyes on the tree line, as if expecting an ambush. The spectral ship itself rocked gently offshore, its glowing sails casting faint reflections on the waves. Escape waited in that boat, a return to known lands, yet peril rode with it as well. These men had already proven they could turn on their own. The spirits had shown 2 clear paths. Now a third arrived unbidden. Crusoe felt the balance shift again inside his chest. He answered without raising his voice. "The island grants no safe harbor to those who break oaths, yet it does not turn away every traveler. Speak your purpose plainly, and I will listen." Reed glanced back at the boat. The men there shifted their weight but did not speak. The water lapped at the sand between them. A seabird called once from the rocks and then fell silent. "We carry news of the world beyond these shores," Reed continued. "The crown has changed hands twice since your exile began. Your name is spoken in certain ports as a man lost to the sea. Some would pay well to learn you still draw breath. Others would pay more to keep that secret buried." Crusoe weighed the words. The spectral ship had brought more than men. It carried the old world with it. The raft in the vision had offered solitude and the unknown. The throne had offered rule and the known. Reed offered a tangled middle path. Friday spoke for the first time. His voice was low and even. "These men bring chains disguised as rope. The island will decide their welcome." The mutineers in the boat exchanged looks. One reached for the hilt of his blade, but stopped when Reed raised a hand. The air grew heavier. The glowing sails of the ship dimmed for a moment, as if a cloud had passed across an unseen sun. Crusoe looked once more toward the open water. The raft and the throne remained in his mind, still and waiting. The boat rocked at the shore. Reed stood patient. The island held its quiet. He took one slow step forward. The choice would be made before the next tide. He took one slow step forward. The choice would be made before the next tide. Crusoe felt the sand shift beneath his feet. It clung lightly, as though reluctant to let go. The boat waited at the water's edge. Reed stood beside it, silent and steady. The island breathed around him. Trees whispered without wind. Vines glowed faint at their roots. He turned once more to look back. The throne of woven reeds rose in the clearing. The raft of driftwood rested on the shore. Both held memories he could not leave behind. He walked to the boat. Each step carried the weight of years spent under the island's spell. Magic had shaped the storms that brought him here. It had softened the nights and brightened the days. Now it stirred in his chest like a sleeping ember. Goodbye to the quiet shores. The words left his lips softly. They hung in the air and faded. Reed nodded without speaking. The creature's eyes held the same ancient light that pulsed in the island's heart. Crusoe climbed aboard. The hull rocked gently. Water lapped at the sides. He settled the small pack of gathered treasures at his feet. A shell that sang when held to the ear. A stone that warmed in darkness. A feather that never lost its color. The glowing sails of the distant ship brightened again. They caught the unseen light and pulled it inward. Crusoe gripped the oar. He pushed away from the sand. The boat slid into deeper water. Ripples spread outward and returned. The island watched him go. Its trees leaned slightly, as if bowing. The throne and raft remained where he had left them. They would stand as markers for any who followed. Crusoe rowed with slow strokes. His arms remembered the rhythm of survival. Each pull carried him farther from the enchanted ground. He felt the magic settle deeper. It did not fade with distance. Instead, it wove into his thoughts. Visions of past days rose and settled like mist. The first storm, the first fruit from hidden groves, the first night without fear. Reed followed in the water for a time. The creature's form rippled beneath the surface. Then it dove and vanished. Crusoe watched the spot where it disappeared. The surface calmed. The boat reached the waiting ship. Hands reached down to pull him aboard. The deck felt solid under his boots. He stood at the rail and looked back one final time. The island lay small on the horizon, its outlines softened in the haze. Magic still shimmered at its edges. He carried that shimmer now. It lived in the quiet spaces of his mind. It would guide him through whatever shores lay ahead. The ship turned, sails filled with ordinary wind, yet the glow remained at their edges. Crusoe breathed the salt air. It tasted of endings and beginnings. The uncertain future stretched before him. He did not know the lands he would reach. He did not know the faces he would meet, but the island's gift stayed with him, a steady light against the unknown. The water widened between him and the shore. Waves rolled in steady lines. He released the rail. His hand rested on the pack beside him. The shell inside gave a faint song. He smiled at the sound. It was enough. The ship sailed onward. The enchanted isle grew smaller until it blended with the sky. Crusoe turned his face to the open sea. The magic traveled with him, quiet, unseen, unbroken.